Good morning. Today's topic.
Well, we are actually going to be discussing Leah Thomas. For those
Leah
of you who do not
Thomas.
know, yes, Leah Thomas, she has actually just won the 500-meter freestyle for the NCAA.
Before we talk anymore, let's just roll the clip.
The University of Pennsylvania senior and transgender swimmer Leah Thomas continues to make history. Thomas, a favorite going into the NCAAs with the fastest time in the nation, finishing a disappointing 5th place in a tie in the 200-yard freestyle at the NCAA Swimming Championships in Georgia. Seconds behind Stanford swimmer Taylor Rock, who set a pool record. Thomas coming off a win in the 500-yard freestyle, saying, amidst the controversy, she's focusing on swimming. After spending 3 years on the men's team, Thomas surpassed the NCAA requirement to compete on the women's squad as a senior, completing 34 months of hormone replacement therapy, far beyond the 12-month NCAA requirement to compete on the women's team. Her presence sparking controversy, from tennis legend Martina Navratilova, saying in a recent interview, she's going by the rules, so the rules need to change, and swimming Olympians.
Because simply to put both trans men and trans women into the women's category is insulting.
Nancy Hogshead Makar, former Olympic champion and current CEO of the nonprofit Champion Women, says it's not about gender, but science.
So the advantages that male puberty gives somebody is far more than a biological woman could ever achieve.
Olympian and University of Texas freshman Erica Sullivan showing her support for Thomas in an op-ed, saying she deserves, like anyone else in this sport, to be celebrated for her hard-won success, not labeled a cheater simply because of her identity.
Morgan. I actually called up Taylor this morning to get her expertise as a counselor on one of the current events going on in the world today, and I figured because she is a counselor, she's probably the most qualified women that I know to have this conversation. So, well, Leah Thomas is just another woman winning another event.
So, Leah Thomas is actually a trans woman.
Oh, what's the problem?
So the problem that you brought me here to discuss is whether or not it's fair, because there's actually been protests that have already erupted on her competition. And prior to even competing, there were protests. And so
I think we've been using that word fair a lot. So this topic is very layered. It's not simple in any stretch of the word, because when we start talking about equality, treatment, rights, it becomes a very complex issue. And I actually did post this video on my Instagram to kind of get some feedback on what people's thoughts were, because it is a very divisive topic. I would think most of us agree on that, because to me, it's not a surprise for anybody for me to say that I'm not a feminist. I do not believe in the feminist ideology. I do advocate for women's rights and equal treatment of women, but I do not agree with the group or the ideologies behind feminists. I think I can champion and be a belief in advocating for women's rights and not be a feminist. But a lot of people seem to have disagreed with that notion. So I kind of first wanted to discuss with you before I kind of showed you the kind of feedback that I got in this issue. So as a feminist, as a woman, do you believe that, as a feminist, are you for trans rights?
personally, I think that feminism and trans rights are two separate things. So I think if you're asking me if I have to agree with trans rights in order to be a feminist, I would say no, inherently. I think it could be either way. You could be agreeing with trans rights but not being a feminist. You could agree with feminism and not agree with trans rights. I think both sectors are separate. Is my opinion.
So you believe they're like separate issues?
Yeah, they're separate issues.
I guess because I'm challenging that notion, because so if a person now chooses to identify as a woman, do they not get the same rights as a woman?
Are we talking specifically rights in sports?
I mean, it's so participation in sports. I mean, you talk about the feminist woman, the feminist movement in general, just advocating for equal pay, being able to vote. So going to school in some cases. So now you're talking about not participating in sports. So this is where I kind of have a disagreement with a lot of like things that like where I feel like when it comes down to feminism, it kind of like is a cognitive dissonance. And I know we've talked about this term where it's almost like your belief system actually clashes with reality, in the sense that right now we have someone who is identifying as a woman, but we're saying that they do not have access to the same rights as women. So are you against, as a feminist, are you against trans rights or trans rights? So are we really saying that trans women are not women? Is that what you're saying? I'm kind of confused. These words are really big for a man. I'm just joking with each other. So I'm not just here trying to like hammer her into the dirt. I really just want to actually have this conversation with someone who I feel like I can actually communicate with, because she is a counselor. So she does practice healthy communication. What up? Respect to the game. Because I think we are polar opposites on the field to be able to discuss this in this kind of, I don't want to say like a forum, but this is our medium to be able to discuss this issue, because it is kind of, like we said before, it's complex and layered. I guess that kind of goes into equal treatment, equal rights. Like, can you say that trans women have the same rights and not have the same treatment, right? Because this goes back to just like, as me as a black person, if you talk about, oh, well, you know what, we're going to let you have equal rights, but you're going to have to go to your own little school, boy. All right, we got this separate water fountain just for you. It's perfect. So this becomes very complex in nature, because you can't tell someone they have equal rights and then treat them differently, right? Or am I off? Should I go back to the back of the bus? You know what I'm saying? But overall, like what? Sorry, I'm talking too much. I'm messing around.
You're talking too much. You're talking way too much.
I'm enjoying this.
So what exactly is your question?
My question is, do you believe the feminist movement includes trans women's or trans rights? And how does that play into equality? Because are we saying that they aren't women, so they don't deserve equal treatment or equal rights? And the whole feminist movement, if I'm kind of understanding it correctly, as people have told me so many times, it's equal rights for men and women. So
I think you're actually bringing a good question to the table. Up until now, feminism has included trans rights. I don't think it has, personally, and especially looking at issues such as trans women competing in sports, right? Just that issue. I think that there are so many people who would consider themselves feminists, but also inherently really disagree that trans women should be allowed on the competitive sports arena. And so I think if we are to discuss trans women's rights in terms of the broad spectrum of feminism, then we actually really need to discuss what that means, because I do think that they have been exclusive. I think what trans women go through and the rights that they have fought for, they are a lot different than the rights that feminism fight for on their platform. For example, trans women rights include hormone therapy. They include getting surgeries covered by insurance. Those are some very overarching things that trans women are fighting for and having to advocate for, versus in feminism, we are advocating for equal pay. We're advocating for reproductive equality. We're reproductive control. And so I think that they have not been a part of the same discussion, but clearly they should be.
I think the thing that you said, which is probably what any educated person probably would say, is like, I think this should be a discussion, because I do think I see a lot of feminists, and I do follow some feminist pages on Instagram. You got to keep up to date with what everybody's doing. And they do include, they state very clearly a lot of times that, trans women are women and these women deserve the same rights. But then this becomes like I said, very divisive. This is why I told you before, like, it's a very layered and complex issue, because this is interesting, because I think you're saying they are, if I'm understanding you correctly, you're saying that trans rights and trans women are separate from regular women.
Well, your original question was, do feminists believe in trans women rights?
Do they support
Do
them?
they support them? And I think that that has been separate. I didn't say that trans women are separate from not regular.
I mean, I think
but that trans women are separate from biologically pronounced women.
So,
I think that the terms of what's been advocated for and the rights, they have been separate.
So, but once a trans woman becomes a woman, so now, like in the case of Leah Thomas, Leah Thomas, she's now identified as a woman. So does she not get the same treatment or rights as a woman?
She should.
So she should.
Yeah, she should.
She should.
She should.
So if she should, then she should be allowed to compete in women's sport. In theory.
She should. And this is where you brought up that really good buzzword, cognitive dissonance. I mean, cognitive dissonance has been coined in the psychological community for years. So cognitive dissonance describes the mental discomfort that results from holding two conflicting beliefs, values, or attitudes. So for example, this is a prime example of cognitive dissonance, because on one hand, you do believe that women should have equal rights in the playing field in the sports arena as men, which they do, right? The NCAA has a women's division and a men's division. They had both competitions in a competitive field. Women were able to compete and men were able to compete. However, now we are including the trans topic into the playing field, where now should trans women be allowed to compete in an athletic arena with other biological women. Now, the problem is, as you can see, Leah Thomas, if you do a little bit of research on her as well, like back when she was a man and competing, she did not place very well. And so then you take into account, okay, she's gone through 2 years of hormone therapy, she's gone through all these hurdles to be able to compete as a woman, and now she's beating out Tokyo 2020 silver medalists. That is a cause for concern.
In theory, you could have women's sports dominated by trans competitors. That's
in theory, yeah.
In theory, yes, that is a very real scenario where essentially we're saying that, over the next 10 years, women's sports could be dominated by trans athletes, or not even trans athletes. These are men who now identify as women and now are women. So this, to me, is why I started bringing up the question: are feminists for or against trans rights? Because I believe in equal treatment. Because at the end of the day, I think that there are people who are discriminated against.
So then, can I ask you a question? So, as a black man, with direct experience with discrimination. What is your solution
to this?
Yeah.
So my solution. So like I said before, I don't agree with feminism. I do agree with the ideology of humanists or humanism, that is the equal treatment for all humans. I think that at the end of the day, feminism in itself, the core root word, excludes men. I think that when you look at how the word is developed and what it originally started in, its roots as a culture, it actually excludes men's rights. So I think at the end of the day, when we talk about humanism, we're talking about everyone's rights. So whether you're a man, woman, a transgendered athlete, it includes all your rights. So now we're looking at it from like a human perspective. So when I look at it as a human perspective, I see that we have the men's Olympics, we have the women's Olympics, we have the Special Olympics. Why not just have the trans Olympics? Because at the end of the day, when I go compete, if I could choose to compete, whether it's like MMA, CrossFit, or anything like that, I compete against other men. And like, that's who I identify as. So why not just create a league of their own? I mean, not to be like hashtag the movie, but at the end of the day, that's how the women's leagues and women's events were developed. So now we're coming into a new time. So why not just create a trans league? And I'm not even saying, I'm saying this in all seriousness. And in reality, I think that is a solution because that allows for inclusion into the sporting world. At the same point in time, it protects the development that has come so far to women's sports. It also, at the same point in time, allows for people to have a competitive league. Now, is it going to take time? Yeah. Just like anything else in time, just like women's rights, it didn't just start overnight. Just like black people, we didn't get our rights right away. It's going to take time. You can't just force it into society. But we also want to hear from you guys in the comment section. So like before, you can hit me up on Instagram, you can hit me up on the YouTube channel, drop your comments below. We really want to hear from you because I don't want to say I was excited, but I thought this was a great opportunity to have a discussion about this complex issue because do you believe, as a feminist, do you support trans rights? If so, why? If so, why not? Just to kind of open up that dialogue because I think that to me is always the path to connection.
Yeah, and to understanding.
The connection.
The connection.
That's right.
Course coming to you.
It's called The Connection. That's the name of the podcast because we connect things and people together. Connect. So as always, we hear from you guys. Thank you guys for watching. Like and subscribe, and we'll see you next week.